What if the reason you still feel lost, still feel like something is missing, still feel like you are moving but not arriving, is not because you lack talent, not because you were born without a gift, not because life dealt you an unfair hand, but because of one quiet mistake you keep making every single day. A mistake so subtle, so normalized, so deeply woven into the way modern life works, that most people never even notice it. They just feel the emptiness and assume something is wrong with them. They scroll, they switch careers, they chase new hobbies, they read books, they watch videos like this one, looking for the answer. But here is the hard truth the Stoics discovered over 2,000 years ago, and that most people still refuse to accept. You will never find your purpose by looking for it the way you have been taught to look. And today, on Daily Stoic Thoughts, you are going to understand exactly why, and more importantly, what to do instead. If you are tired of feeling like everyone else has figured something out that you haven't, drop the words, "I am ready," in the comments right now, and let's begin. Let's start with the honest picture of where most people are. Because before you can understand the solution, you have to be willing to sit with the real problem. You are not lazy. That is the first thing to establish. You are not unmotivated. You are not broken. You care deeply, maybe too deeply. You want your life to mean something. You want to wake up knowing why you are here. You want that feeling of alignment, that sense that what you do every day actually connects to who you are at your core. You have wanted that for a long time. But here is what actually happens. You wake up, and the first thing that fills your mind is not your own voice. It is everyone else's. The news, the highlight reels, the career paths that society decided were worthy, the goals your parents planted in you before you were old enough to question them, the version of success your friends are chasing that you half-heartedly adopted because you did not yet know your own. And so you move through your days shaped by invisible hands. You take the job that made sense on paper. You pursue the goals that sounded impressive out loud. You perform the life that others validate and call good. All while that quiet inner voice, the one that actually knows something, gets drowned out, ignored, buried under layers of noise and obligation and other people's expectations. And then one day, sometimes it is a quiet Tuesday, sometimes it is a birthday, sometimes it is watching someone else step fully into their purpose. You feel it, that hollow feeling, the suspicion that you have been building the wrong thing, that you are on the right road to the wrong destination, that something essential has been missing and you cannot name it. The Stoics called this condition living against your nature, and they considered it the root of all human suffering, not poverty, not illness, not failure, but the deep misalignment between who you are and how you live. Marcus Aurelius, who had every external reason to feel purposeful, who commanded the greatest empire on earth, wrote in his private journal, as though he were a man searching for himself. He wrote, "Lose no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." He was not writing that for posterity. He was writing it because even emperors lose themselves. Even the most powerful humans in history wake up some mornings wondering if they are living the life they were meant to live. So if you feel that way, you are in remarkable company. But company does not fix the problem. Understanding does. So let's go deeper. Here is the central lie that keeps most people from ever finding their purpose. And it is so widely accepted that questioning it feels strange. The lie is this: purpose is something you find. Think about the language we use. Find your purpose, discover your calling, search for your passion, seek your destiny. All of it frames purpose as a hidden object somewhere out in the world, waiting to be stumbled upon, as though if you just travel to the right place or read the right book or meet the right mentor, it will suddenly appear and everything will make sense. This framing is not just unhelpful, it is actively destructive. because it turns you into a passive seeker instead of an active builder. It makes you wait. It makes you search endlessly outward when the only movement that matters is inward. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of the most respected philosophers in Rome, taught his students something that still cuts through the noise centuries later. He said, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life." What he was pointing at is this: the person who waits for the perfect circumstances to reveal their purpose will wait forever. Because purpose is not revealed by circumstances, it is revealed by commitment. Every person you have ever admired, who seems to be living with deep purpose, who wakes up knowing why they are here, who moves through the world with that quiet certainty you want for yourself, they did not find their purpose. They built it, they chose it, they committed to it before they were certain. They stayed with it long enough for it to become real. But most people never do that, and there are very specific reasons why. So let's name them one by one. The first reason most people never find their purpose is that they are waiting for certainty before they commit. They want to feel sure before they begin. They want a guarantee that this path is the right one before they invest their time and energy into it. They want the clarity to come first and the action to follow. But the Stoics understood something fundamental about the nature of clarity. It does not precede action, it follows it. You do not think your way into a purposeful life. You act your way into one. You do not wait until you feel ready. You move, and readiness comes. You do not hold out for the lightning bolt moment of revelation. You build something small and consistent, and over time the direction reveals itself. Seneca wrote it bluntly: begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life. Not someday, not when the conditions are right, not after you have figured it all out. Now, today, this moment. But most people do not do this. They postpone. They say, "I will start when I have more time, more money, more confidence, more clarity." They wait for a sign, and they miss the only sign that matters, which is the quiet pull they already feel towards something, the thing they keep coming back to, even when it makes no practical sense, the thing they would do even if no one was watching and no one was paying. That pull is not random. That pull is data. That pull is the beginning of purpose knocking on the door, and most people open the door, look out, see no fully formed destiny waiting on the porch, and close the door again and go back to waiting. The second reason most people never find their purpose is the one that hurts to hear. They have outsourced their identity to other people's opinions. From the time you were a child, you learned to read the room. You learned which version of yourself got praised and which version got ignored or criticized. You learned to perform the self that earned approval and suppress the self that caused discomfort, and you got very good at it. So good that eventually you forgot it was a performance. And now you make decisions about your life based not on what you genuinely want, but on what you imagine others will think. You choose the career path that sounds impressive at dinner parties. You abandon the interest that feels too niche or too strange to explain. You silence the ambition that feels too big because you are afraid of looking arrogant if you pursue it and fail. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." Read that again. Sit with it, because it is one of the most brutally accurate descriptions of the human condition ever written. You love yourself, but you trust strangers more than you trust yourself. You have instincts, you have desires, you have a genuine inner compass. But the moment the crowd points a different direction, you follow the crowd and call your instincts naive. This is how decades pass. This is how people arrive at the end of their lives, full of the aching regret of unlived potential. Not because they lacked ability, but because they spent their entire lives managing other people's perceptions instead of building their own truth. The third reason is silence, or rather the complete absence of it. You cannot hear your purpose in a noisy life. It is that simple. Purpose speaks quietly. It speaks in moments of stillness, in the space between tasks, in the early morning before the world gets loud, in the long walks without headphones, in the journal pages no one will ever read. But most people are terrified of silence. They fill every gap with noise, every commute with podcasts, every meal with screens, every spare moment with scrolling, not because they enjoy it, but because silence is uncomfortable, because silence forces you to be alone with your thoughts, and your thoughts have questions you are not ready to answer. And so they stay busy, they stay distracted, they stay loud, and the quiet voice of purpose never gets a word in. The Stoics built silence into their practice deliberately. Marcus Aurelius journaled every night, not to perform reflection, but to practice it. Epictetus taught his students to sit with discomfort, to resist the pull toward distraction, to stay present with themselves long enough to actually know themselves. Because here is what the Stoics understood that most people don't. To resist the pull toward distraction, to stay present with themselves long enough to actually know themselves. Because here is what the Stoics understood that most people don't. You cannot live your purpose if you do not know yourself. And you cannot know yourself if you never sit still long enough to listen. So now you understand the problem. You understand the lie of searching endlessly outward. You understand why certainty never comes before commitment. You understand how deeply other people's opinions have shaped the life you are living. You understand what the noise is costing you. And here is where most content stops. Here is where most videos give you a list of tips and send you on your way. But Daily Stoic Thoughts is not going to do that, because tips without depth are just more noise. Instead, you are going to understand the Stoic framework for actually building a purposeful life. And it starts with one of the most important questions you will ever sit with. Marcus Aurelius asked himself this question regularly. You can feel it running through the pages of Meditations like a thread. The question is simply this: what is my function? Not what am I passionate about, not what makes me happy, not what will make me rich or famous or admired, but what is my function? What is the role I am here to play? What does this life, with its specific circumstances, its specific relationships, its specific capacities, actually call me to do? This is the Stoic reframe that changes everything, because it shifts purpose from a feeling you chase to a role you inhabit. It moves it from something abstract and elusive to something concrete and daily. The Stoics believed that every human being has a nature, a set of genuine capacities, genuine inclinations, genuine values, and that a purposeful life is simply a life lived in alignment with that nature. Not performing someone else's version of greatness, not chasing the goals the culture decided were worth chasing, but doing the thing that your specific nature is built for with full commitment and full presence. And here is the crucial insight. Your nature has been speaking to you your entire life. You just haven't been listening with the right ears. Think about this carefully and honestly. What is the thing you keep returning to, even when it makes no practical sense? Not the thing you think you should want, not the thing that sounds impressive, but the thing that pulls at you quietly and consistently, the thing you find yourself thinking about when your mind is free to wander, the thing you would explore even if no one ever validated you for it, even if no one ever paid you for it, even if no one ever knew you were doing it. That thing is not random. That thing is a signal. And most people dismiss it as a hobby or an indulgence or a fantasy because it doesn't fit neatly into the structures society has approved. Epictetus said, "Know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly." In other words, understand your nature first, Then build your life to fit it, not the other way around. Not squeeze yourself into a life and then try to find yourself inside it. But the problem is, most people have spent so long performing a self that others approved of that they genuinely don't know who they are anymore. They have been so shaped by expectations and roles and comparisons that their own voice is almost indistinguishable from the crowd. So, the first real work is not strategic. It is not about planning or goal setting or productivity. The first real work is excavation, digging beneath the layers of conditioning to find what is actually yours. Here is a practice the Stoics used that you can begin tonight. It is called the evening review, and Marcus Aurelius did a version of this every single night without fail. You sit in silence. No phone, no background noise, no input of any kind, and you ask yourself 3 questions. The first question is, what did I do today that felt genuinely mine, not performed, not done for approval, but genuinely aligned with who I actually am, even if it was something small, even if it was a single conversation or a single moment of honest thought, you look for it. The second question is, where did I betray myself today? Where did I say yes when I meant no? Where did I shrink to fit someone else's comfort? Where did I follow the crowd instead of my own compass? You do not ask this to punish yourself. You ask it to see clearly. The third question is, if no one was watching and no one was judging and there were no consequences for being exactly who I am, what would I do differently tomorrow? Sit with that question. Really, sit with it. Because the answer that comes is one of the most honest things you will ever hear from yourself. Do this for 7 nights in a row, and you will begin to see a pattern. You will begin to hear a voice that has been there all along, quieter than the noise but more consistent, more persistent, more yours. Now let's talk about the role of suffering in purpose, because this is something the Stoics were not afraid to address directly, and most modern conversations about purpose completely avoid. Viktor Frankl, who was not a Stoic but who discovered Stoic truths through the most brutal circumstances imaginable, wrote from inside a Nazi concentration camp that the last of human freedoms is the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. He watched people in conditions of unimaginable suffering, and he observed something that changed his understanding of human nature permanently. The people who survived, not just physically but psychologically, were the ones who found meaning in their suffering, not despite their pain but through it. They had a why that was strong enough to carry any how. The Stoics understood this intuitively. They did not try to eliminate hardship from their philosophy. They built hardship into it. They used a practice called negative visualization, deliberately imagining loss, imagining failure, imagining difficulty, not to be pessimistic, but to be prepared and to appreciate what they had. And in that practice, they often discovered what they valued most, because you cannot know what you truly value until you imagine living without it. Here is the application for you. Think about the hardest thing you have ever been through, the loss, the failure, the period of your life you would never want to repeat. Now ask yourself, what did that period reveal about you? What did you discover you were capable of that you never would have known in comfort? What did it show you mattered when everything else fell away? That answer is often closer to your purpose than anything you find in a comfortable moment. Because purpose is not built in ease, it is forged in the honest confrontation with what you are made of. Seneca wrote, "It is not that I am brave, it is that I know what is worth being afraid of." What he meant is that when you are clear about what matters, when you have done the work of knowing yourself, fear loses much of its grip, because most fear is not about real danger, it is about the possibility of judgment, the possibility of failure, the possibility of being seen trying and not succeeding. And that fear The fear of being seen, the fear of being wrong, the fear of choosing a path and having it not work out, is the single greatest barrier between most people and a purposeful life. They do not lack the capacity for purpose. They lack the willingness to be uncomfortable in the pursuit of it. They want purpose to feel safe before they commit to it. And purpose never feels safe at the beginning. It feels uncertain and exposed, and a little bit terrifying, and that is exactly right. Because anything worth building requires you to move before you are certain. This brings us to what the Stoics called prohairesis. It is one of the most important concepts in all of Stoic philosophy and one of the least discussed. Prohairesis is your faculty of choice, your capacity to decide, your power to direct your own will. Epictetus considered it the most sacred thing a human being possesses, more valuable than wealth, more valuable than status, more valuable than health, because everything else can be taken from you, but your faculty of choice, your ability to decide who you are going to be in any given moment, that is always yours. And here is why this matters for purpose. You do not wait for purpose to be given to you. You choose it. You exercise your prohairesis. You look at your life, your nature, your circumstances, your values, and you make a decision. You say, this is the direction I am committing to, not because I am certain it is right, not because I have a guarantee of success, but because it is mine, because it is aligned with who I actually am, and I am choosing it fully. This is the moment purpose stops being a search and starts being a practice. This is the moment you stop drifting and start directing. This is the moment the Stoics considered the true beginning of a philosophical life. The moment a person stops being moved entirely by external forces and starts moving from within. But let's be honest about what happens after that moment, because the inspiration often fades, and what remains is the daily reality of doing the work when you don't feel like it, when no one is watching, when results are slow and doubt is loud. This is where most people abandon their purpose, not dramatically, not in one decisive moment of giving up, but gradually, in the small daily surrenders. In the mornings they choose distraction over discipline. In the evenings they choose comfort over commitment. In the weeks they go through the motions and tell themselves they will recommit tomorrow. The Stoics had a word for the virtue required in those moments. They called it continentia, self-command, the capacity to do what you have decided to do, even when every part of you would rather do something easier. It is not glamorous. It is not exciting. It is not the part that makes it into the highlight reel, but it is the entire game. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, "At dawn, when you rise reluctantly, let this thought be present. I am rising to the work of a human being. Why then am I dissatisfied if I am going to do the things for which I exist?" He was reminding himself that purpose is not a feeling, it is a practice. It is not the days you feel inspired, it is the days you show up anyway. It is not the moments of clarity, it is the consistent commitment that creates clarity over time. So let's bring everything together now, because understanding is only the beginning. What you actually need is a way to live this, a way to take everything the Stoics taught and everything we have explored in this conversation and turn it into something real, something daily, something that actually moves you from where you are to where you are meant to be. And it starts with a single, honest admission, one that most people are too proud or too afraid to make. Most people are not lost because life is complicated. They are lost because they have never truly committed to knowing themselves. They have never sat with the discomfort of honest self-examination. They have never asked themselves the hard questions and stayed with the silence long enough to hear the answers. They have never chosen their own path loudly enough to drown out the crowd. And so they drift, not because they are weak, not because they are incapable, but because no one ever told them that the work of finding purpose is first and foremost an inner work. It is not a search out there in the world. It is an excavation in here, inside the life you are already living, inside the experiences you have already had, inside the values you already hold, inside the quiet signals that have been trying to reach you for years. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, left a comfortable life as a merchant. After a shipwreck stripped him of everything he had, he washed up on the shores of Athens with nothing and walked into a bookshop where he picked up a book about Socrates, and something in him shifted. He did not plan to become a philosopher. He did not map out a 5-year strategy for purposeful living. He followed the pull. He sat with what resonated. He committed to understanding himself, and that commitment, made in a moment of total uncertainty, became the foundation of one of the most influential philosophical movements in human history. Your shipwreck may not be as dramatic as Zeno's. It may be a quiet moment of dissatisfaction on an ordinary Tuesday. It may be the feeling reading these words right now that something is shifting, something is clarifying, something that has been waiting a long time is finally getting your attention. Do not dismiss that feeling. That feeling is the beginning. So here is the Stoic blueprint, the practical path from lost to purposeful, built on everything we have explored today. The first step is solitude, real solitude, not the absence of people but the presence of yourself. You need to create space in your life where it is just you and your thoughts. No input, no noise, no content consumption, just reflection. Start with 15 minutes every morning before the world gets loud. Sit with yourself, breathe, and ask, A. What actually matters to me today? Not what should matter, not what others need from me, but what matters to me. Do this every day for 30 days, and you will begin to hear a voice you forgot you had. The second step is radical honesty. You need to get honest about the gap between the life you are living and the life that actually feels like yours. This is uncomfortable. This is the part most people skip, but it is not optional. Take a piece of paper and write down every major choice in your life right now. Your career, your relationships, your daily habits, your goals, and next to each one write a single word, either mine or borrowed. Mine means it came from your genuine values and desires. Borrowed means it came from expectation, pressure, fear, or someone else's vision of what your life should look like. What you discover when you do this exercise will be confronting, and it will be the most useful map you have ever drawn. The third step is commitment without certainty. You pick one thing, just one, that feels genuinely yours, one direction, one pursuit, one practice that aligns with who you actually are rather than who you have been performing, and you commit to it for 90 days, not until you feel sure, not until you see results, not until the fear goes away, but for 90 days regardless. You show up for it every day. You give it your focused attention. You protect it from the noise and the doubt and the opinions and the distraction. 90 days is long enough for clarity to emerge. It is long enough for results to begin to appear. It is long enough for you to know whether you are on your path or whether you need to adjust. The fourth step is silence about your progress. This is the Stoic discipline that most people find hardest. You do not announce your commitment on social media. You do not tell everyone what you are doing. You do not seek validation or encouragement from the outside world. You work in silence. You build in private. You let the work accumulate before you let the world see it, because premature announcement disperses the very energy you need to execute. Every time you tell someone about your plan before you have done the work, you get a small reward, a little hit of acknowledgement, and that hit convinces your brain that you have already made progress, and so the urgency to actually do the work quietly fades. The Stoics knew this. They were not interested in appearing purposeful. They were interested in being purposeful. And there is a vast difference between those two things. One is performance, one is practice. The fifth step is the most important and the most ongoing. It is returning, because you will get knocked off course. The world will pull you back into its noise. The fear will return. The doubt will get loud. The old patterns will reassert themselves. And when that happens, which it will, the question is not whether you fall back, but how quickly you return. Marcus Aurelius fell back constantly. You can read it in the Meditations, page after page of a man reminding himself of the same truths, recommitting to the same practices, returning to himself after drifting away, and he considered that returning not a failure, but the practice itself. The practice is not maintaining perfect alignment. The practice is noticing when you have drifted and coming back without self-punishment, without drama, without announcing the return, just returning. This is what separates the people who eventually find their way from the people who give up. Not talent, not intelligence, not perfect circumstances, but the willingness to keep returning, to treat every morning as a new beginning, to refuse to let yesterday's drift define today's direction. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest, as it happens." You cannot control everything. You cannot guarantee outcomes. You cannot force purpose to reveal itself on your schedule, but you can control your attention. You can control your commitment. You can control whether you show up for your own life today. And today is all that is ever actually available to you. Here is what life begins to look like when you actually do this work. And I want you to hold this picture. You wake up, and there is a quality of quiet intention in the morning that was not there before. You know what you are building and why, not because someone told you, not because it looked good on paper, but because you chose it, because it came from you, from the honest excavation of who you actually are. You move through your day with less scattered energy, not because the world became less demanding, but because you became clearer about what deserves your response and what does not. You stop engaging with every distraction, every opinion, every noise that used to pull you sideways, not because you are cold or indifferent, but because you know where your attention is going and why. The comparison stops, or at least it loses its power. You are no longer measuring your life against the highlight reel of people on a completely different path. You are on your path, and your path has its own metrics, its own milestones, its own rhythm, and you have learned to trust that rhythm even when it is slower than you would like. The need for external validation begins to dissolve, not all at once, but gradually. Because you are validating yourself through action, you are building evidence through consistent commitment. And evidence is far more convincing than encouragement. You stop needing people to tell you that you are on the right track because you can feel it in the quality of your days, in the alignment between what you value and what you do, in the quiet satisfaction of work that is genuinely yours. And the fear does not disappear. Let's be honest about that. The fear does not go away, but it changes its nature. It stops being the fear of wasting your life, the existential dread of being permanently lost, and it becomes instead a smaller, more manageable fear, the fear of specific challenges on a specific path. And that kind of fear is not a warning sign, it is a signpost. It tells you that you are moving, that you are building something that matters, that you are alive to your own life in a way you were not before. Seneca wrote at the end of one of his letters, "Retire into yourself as much as you can. Associate with those who will make a better man of you. Welcome those who you can make better." That is a complete philosophy of purposeful living. In 2 sentences, go inward, surround yourself with people who call you upward, and become someone who does the same for others. That is it. That is the whole thing. You do not need a dramatic transformation. You do not need perfect conditions. You do not need to wait until you have figured it all out. You need to begin the inward journey, today in this moment, with whatever clarity you currently have, and trust that more clarity will come through the practice, not before it. The Stoics did not promise you a perfect life. They promised you something far more valuable. They promised that if you do the work of knowing yourself, if you commit to living in alignment with your nature, if you choose your own path and walk it with discipline and presence, you will stop feeling lost, not because life becomes easier, but because you become more yourself. And when you are fully yourself, fully committed, fully present in your own life, it becomes a practice. It becomes a daily act. It becomes the way you move through the world, and that transformation, quiet as it is everything. If today something shifted for you, if something in this conversation reached a part of you that has been waiting to be reached, leave a comment below that says, "I am returning to myself," and mean it. Let that be the first act of your commitment. And if you want more of this, if you want to keep building this kind of clarity, make sure you are subscribed to Daily Stoic Thoughts and hit the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. The Stoics had a closing reminder they gave to their students at the end of every lesson. It was simple, it was direct, it was everything. Begin.